All right, Liam, thanks a lot for doing this, man. I really appreciate it. It's great talking to you. I can't believe I had a celebrity in my backyard and I never knew about it. So,
If
yeah,
you're in Montreal, let me know. Next time you're in Montreal, ping me because I'm
yeah,
always
and
here.
if you're headed to Toronto or anything like that, let me know as well on that side because I can
Yep.
make the trip up there to come see you.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
tell me a little bit about the genesis story of Time Doctor. How did it start out? I hear about a tutoring business in the past life.
Yes. So I started previous life where I was an academic, and I think my master's degree is like somewhere on the floor here because I just moved into a new office and I brought my degrees with me. So I was about 15 minutes from here, McGill University. I was teaching there. I was pursuing my graduate degrees and ended up teaching a class. And for many people that don't really know, your first and second year in undergrad, it's not taught by professors, it's taught by graduate students. And that was me. And started the semester with 300 students, ended up with less than 150 by the end of the semester, and the worst academic reviews in the history of the department. I remember walking into my supervisor's office and I said, I don't think I'm very good at this. And he said, No, you are not. And I said, okay, if I'm not very good at it, what do you think I should do? And he said, well, you got to get pretty good at this teaching thing if you want to do this for the rest of your life. So either figure out that or do something else. And 6 weeks later, I threw a master's thesis under his door and I walked away from grad school and opened up my first tutoring business. So I realized that off of lecturing, and this
Hmm.
was 2009, 2010, 2009. I
Hmm.
realized that I could tutor students through Skype. And I just found out a week ago that Skype is shutting down.
Yeah, I heard.
Wild to hear about that. So I could tutor students through Skype and I could double the amount of money that I was making because I wouldn't have to go from location to location when I was tutoring kids. And I turned that into a tutoring business that was running relatively well. And I ended up with another big problem, which was I couldn't actually equate for the amount of time that was tracked for between my tutors and my students. I was hiring a whole bunch of
Hmm.
tutors, and the student would say, you billed me for 10 hours. I worked with the student for 5 hours. And then I'd go to the tutor and say, did you work with Billy for 10 hours? And you'd say, of course I did. So I'd end up having to refund the student for 5 hours and pay the tutor the full 10 hours. This was really
Hmm.
destroying the business. And then my now business partner, Rob, had a very early alpha of an application that we now call Time Doctor. And I actually met him at South by Southwest, which is happening right now too in
Oh,
Austin,
wow.
Texas. March is a kind of a wild
You're not going?
time. No, I used to go quite a bit, and it's gotten so big now that the value really isn't there in comparison to where it was when it was a couple thousand people. And probably the
I
people.
would wanna go there just for the nuance. I've never been. I hear great stories about it. Your Genesis stories is right linking back to that, so pretty
Yeah,
cool
it's
stuff.
like spring break for nerds. It's really a lot of fun. I
Really.
I love it. Yeah, I especially those early days where tech was it felt so much smaller,
Hmm.
2010, 2009. There's actually a story that I can tell you that is off of NDA now, so I can disclose it. I actually used to work for a YouTube channel called Epic Mealtime, and they would
Okay.
make these big meals and they pour Jack Daniels on it and they would eat it. And also at that conference, I was connected with a company that essentially allowed them to be able to sell their advertising at many multiples to what they were currently doing directly with YouTube.
Huh.
And that was a huge contract for me. And it was a great deal to be able to close. So came out of South by Southwest realizing, do I want to continue on with the tutoring business? It's working, but it's not working really well. And I need this technology in order to be able to deploy it and scale it. And I realized that I had some cash from a previous acquisition. I'm going to go in with this guy that I don't even know that lives halfway across the planet and start this business. And then fast forward to today, which is hundreds of thousands of employees all over the world that we serve inside of Time Doctor, 10,000 plus customers, and we're having a lot of fun.
Wow, I think that's the most important part, the fun part. And
Yeah,
your own employees, where are you guys at for your headcount?
we are around, I think, approximately 150, 160. That point. I would have to talk to HR to get the exact number. We're hiring quite a bit recently. So we saw a huge spike during COVID, right? We grew 211%
Whew.
in 2020. And for an eight-figure SaaS company to grow at 200 plus percent it's off the charts in terms of growth. So we hired a
Love
lot
it.
at that point. And then we actually had a lot of growing pains because we hired a lot of people
Yeah.
and we didn't really trust our gut. And a lot of the people that we were hiring, we thought to ourselves, we don't know what we're doing. We've never been in a company that's scaling at 200%. We have to
Hmm.
hire all these experts. And we realized long term that we probably went a little too aggressive on the hiring. So we pulled that
Hmm.
back and now we're doing, really good numbers, not 200%, but we're doing really good numbers and on our way to get to that $1 billion valuation that you were talking about,
Love
Keith.
it. Love it. That's amazing. Here's my next question for you. How crucial
Sure.
is productivity tracking in a remote setup? Because productivity is such a, I don't know, something up in the air. It's really hard to pinpoint like what that is, and especially now stakes are more higher because everyone's going remote. So how do we measure it? How important is it? How do we do it? Can you just shed some light on that?
I think that this is probably the most important part of the remote technology stack. I'm a little bit biased, but I think it's the most important because what we're seeing right now with this push back to the office, right? We're
Hmm.
seeing Elon talking about everyone getting back to the office. Trump has signed his executive order stating that all government employees need to return to an office or they're going to be fired. And it's really a political issue. But the problem that they're really looking at is trust and transparency. That's what they're trying to solve for. They're trying to solve for transparency inside of remote work. What did you do
Hmm.
throughout your workday? And then what other pieces of information can you communicate to others in order for them to be able to do their work? That's fundamentally what Time Doctor does. We provide transparency as a SaaS product. And so you
Hmm.
don't need that office. Essentially, what I'm saying is, do you want to go to the old school way of measuring what people are doing throughout their workday, which is an office, which costs you about a third of your P&L? Or do you want to pay 1% of your P&L and use something like Time Doctor? And to me, it's not just a nice to have, it's a need to have. And as you grow as an organization, the larger organizations get, the more they need this tool. That's another thing
Hmm.
that I found out recently that's been a real big eye opener for me is if you run a telecom company with 10,000 people, 20,000 people in it, you need it in order to be able to operate your businesses effectively, particularly if they're operating remotely.
Yeah, it's a non-negotiable now. You not have something like this in a remote environment. But how do you replace the office? Do you think it's just overhyped, or is there a way to replicate that in the remote environment? Or I think the purpose is to get to the same level of productivity, right? So, what's the best possible way of getting to it in a remote environment?
So I think you need to be able to, number one, create connections with people. In the book that I wrote about 2 years ago, we called it running remote, but what I really wanted to call it was async. So the book essentially breaks down a methodology that most remote first companies over the last 5 years of running remote have implemented, which is what I call asynchronous management. So it's the ability to be able to manage people without directly interacting with them synchronously. So we're speaking synchronously right now. Actually, a good analogy is synchronous is like old school television. You're probably
Hmm.
around the same age as me. At 8:30 at night on Fridays, I would want to watch Friends.
Hmm.
And if I couldn't watch Friends, then the next day at school, I'd be left out of all the conversations, particularly because all of the girls were talking about Friends and I wanted to chat with them about whatever the hell Chandler did the week before. But if you missed it, right? You had to wait an extra 6 months to be able to pick up a rerun. And asynchronous management is like Netflix. So the information is available to you when you want to be able to consume it. So our
Mm.
philosophy is that the platform is the manager. The project management system that you're working with, the CRM, your video recording tools, your Looms, your email, your Slack, all of this communication stack is essentially a asynchronous management platform so that if your team member is in Pakistan, they can actually pick up exactly where you left off in Niagara Falls. And it allows for you to be able to run and operate a business without people necessarily speaking to each other synchronously.
Mm.
Because if your employees are in Pakistan, it's pretty difficult, right? You probably have 3, 4 hours of bridge time before you're going to drop off and that next shift pops up. So async to me is the core secret. And that was the number one insight that I had gained when I looked at all of these companies pre-pandemic was they all had at their core asynchronous management as their operating system.
Yeah, so it's not like you said in real time anymore. It's there for you to use throughout the tools that you have access to. And you can basically go back in time and just jump into that conversation if you need to have whenever that point occurred. So,
Absolutely. If I put you in
yeah.
the business, if I put you in our business, and I gave you access to Asana and Trello and Slack and all the systems that we have, and I asked you, why did we make this particular business decision 2 years ago? You should be able to find out without talking to
Mm.
anybody. You just go back 2 years in the data, and then you say,
That's what I
oh,
love about
it was
this,
here.
right?
This is why it was important. That's the key switch. And it allows you to be able to onboard employees in a way that is you just cannot do when you run an office environment because in office environments have a bit of a crutch.
I
Everyone
have
pays
I
to
have
come
built
into an office.
for the last 5 years, for my some of my employees have been here for the last 4 years, for almost as long as we've arrived. And we started using Time Doctor early on. So I have every single data point for that person, for every single shift that person has logged into, and what they've done for those 8 hours for the last 4 years now. And we can just go
Mhm.
back in time to any of those points. Just imagine having that. And for us, because we're a recruitment business, that's incredibly valuable. Now I can go to my clients and I can show them that, hey, here's the last 4 years of work that this person has done. Here's a summary of that. This is all proven. So, there you can't go wrong on this stuff, right? So like before
Mhm.
it used to be, gotta call the manager, I gotta get the references checked out. The references are right here in front of us in real time, right? Like just that time machine that Apple used to have, I think, on their machines before.
Right.
I don't think they do that anymore. But yeah, so that's incredible. One thing that pops up for some of our employees as well is a question that I want to ask you is how do you balance employee privacy and with productivity tracking, right? I understand the need of productivity tracking in remote environment, but people have concerns about privacy, especially with Time Doctor, because the Time Doctor is one of the suites of the softwares that allows taking screenshots as well. And quite frankly, we love that feature because it's just an added level of security for everyone involved. But what are your
Mhm.
thoughts on that?
We have another concept in the book, which was I found in a lot of companies that operated remotely before the pandemic, which is something that I call radical transparency. So everyone can have access to everyone else's data. So everyone knows right now, if they looked at my Time Doctor, then I'm on a call with you and Laura's here too, right? And they have that data and they have access to it. And if they want to access what I'm doing, I think there's a power dynamic when it is okay, if I'm the boss, I can look at what you're doing, but because you're the employee, you can't look at what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
they see what I'm doing and I can see what they're doing. So the concept of radical transparency, everyone having access to everyone else's data, it number one creates a lot more trust inside of the environment. But then number two, the other added benefit is it allows for everybody to have access to essentially the same information as the CEO of the company. So that's
Mm.
where we want to get. If you have the same informational advantage as the CEO of the company, then you can actually make business decisions that are magically way more insightful and intelligent than when you didn't have access to that information. And I actually think the vast majority of the reasons why employees make bad decisions is because they don't have access to the information in order to be able to make those decisions. So if you just
Hmm.
empower them with it, then a lot of those things change. So the only thing that we keep back inside of Time Doctor is HR data. So
Hmm.
information about people and culture, that there's a firewall around that information. We just did, and Laura was actually in the same call with me. We just did our senior leadership monthly call where every single department head goes through and gives their 5 minutes on where the business is and what's going on. And we have discussions about what's happening inside of each of those departments. We use a tool called Fellow,
Hmm.
and Fellow is an AI that actually allows you to be able to reference any part of that particular meeting. And any employee inside of the company can jump into that call, figure out where was Laura's name mentioned in this
Hmm.
call, and they can just reference that directly. It's this concept that if we're just being transparent, that reinforces trust. I think that trust and transparency are basically connected at the hip. And if you don't have one, you don't have the other.
And it's for me, how I look at this is that when you're in an office, sorry about that, when you're inside an
No worries.
office, anyone can just jump in and they can be right behind you and they have access to your screen. So we know what we're working on while and we're in a real-time environment, right? So this kind of gives us that transparency where it actually makes us feel like that we're more connected when we have everything wide in the open, right? So that's another way of how we look at it, and that's how we explain this as well. And in some cases, yeah, we do have that option of turning that feature off for some employees who are working on critical data like HR stuff and financial stuff and things like that. And our clients like to do that as well. But I would say 90% of our people would have that feature on. And I feel you have to have that because, we're remote. All right, so
Yep.
here's a few more for you, Liam. How do you keep a globally distributed Time Doctor team connected beyond just work? I want to get into a little bit of a culture side of things because you guys see all of these amazing teams working, a lot of them remotely as well, and then you guys are fully remote. So, how do you build culture around Time Doctor staying remote?
The most important thing that you need to address is companies are not, and I think it's specifically on like page 86 of this book. Let me just look it up because I can pull it up for you directly. There's a company called List. I don't know if List, they're like a task management app.
Yeah, I may have heard of him.
Yeah, so they are a very successful remote first company as well. And if you want to set up an interview with them, let me know because I think that they're also just they were in the book and are really one of the thought leaders when it comes to remote work. So
Okay.
this is a really good data point here. So it says what companies think team culture is, which is this,
Hmm.
and what team culture actually is. So how you socialize together and how you work together. And
Hmm.
for me, that really boils down the core of what I think about when I think about building a company, which is mission, vision, values should be absolutely at the top of everything that you do. Why are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? For us, it is to provide trust and transparency to the world through Time Doctor, and a higher level goal for that as an organization. What we're passionate about is we're really passionate about empowering the world's transition towards remote work. That's what we do at the company.
Hmm.
And we specifically test people on mission, vision, and values all the time. So if we do a in-person retreat, and I've done this actually for people when I do consulting, is I'll walk into a company retreat. And the first thing that I will ask is, okay, everyone, close your laptops, take out a piece of paper.
Hmm.
What is the mission of this company? What is the vision? What's the 5 year vision? Where do you want to go? What are the, and with those 5 values, what are the 5 values of the company? Write them down on a piece of paper. And we find out how many people actually remember them. And the average that I've gotten is about 20% of people can name them all properly. That's a big, so at Time Doctor, we're at 86%. And people know
Nice.
what is the vision of this company? Why are you here? Why are you doing this? Not just to get a check, but because you're excited about what we're currently doing. as an organization. So nothing works if you don't have that locked in. So I can talk to you all day about pizza parties and Zoom calls where you're all hanging out and having fun and all this kind of stuff. But if it doesn't fundamentally, if people are not excited about doing the work, there's no
Hmm.
point in moving forward from that point. So just mission, vision, values is really important. There's another great book that I don't have in front of me right now. I don't think I do, which is Entrepreneur Operating System. And
Hmm.
they have exactly the same mindset, which is mission, vision, values must be the absolute cornerstone of everything that you do. Because if you don't, then people aren't excited to be able to work inside of your company. So that's number one. Once you get that handled, then you need to roll into, okay, how do you connect with people? Inside of asynchronous organizations, we don't just not meet with people, but what we do is a lot of the boring stuff is already handled. So just going back to this call that we had with department heads, they had a full report, one single slide, all the data that's on that slide, and then they had a Loom video explaining that slide for 10, 15 minutes. So everyone's requirement is to go in beforehand, watch all the videos, comment. Laura's actually really good at this, commenting on what happened inside of that video, asking questions about it. And then we go on for another hour and a half, all of us, which is a very expensive call, to be able to actually discuss the core issues. So don't necessarily focus on connection, not just going through the motions. And a lot of the times with direct reports, I'm not really interested in whether or not they filled out their TI-83 form. It is, you're not hitting your target. What's going on underneath that? What are the bigger issues that I need to be able to address? And the vast majority of the time, underperformance inside of the company is due to some type of personal issue. So if you can address that, that is the most important piece of the pie, in my
I love
opinion,
the
towards moving something forward.
Yeah, and I think that's where the software that you guys have put together also comes in handy, right? Like you can pinpoint the people who have an maybe capacity to burn out because they're putting in more hours and things like that. So I really love that feature that it's not just like it's so much more when you're in a remote environment. Burnout is real. It's happening
Mm.
because these people are not in front of us. How do we track that? So having a productivity tool which tells us that, hey, this guy's doing a great job, but there's also a chances of this person burning out because they logged in 4 times over the weekend and consistently going over their 8 hour shifts, right, to 15 days over the last 30 days. So that's the visibility that we need. But I love the fact that what you just said, and I think yeah, EOS traction by Gino Hickman. We run our businesses. Our business is a much smaller side, but we use the level 10 format on how we do the meetings and everything is recorded, everything is tracked and all of that stuff. But what culture to me is absolutely how you hit the hammer on the nail head right there by saying that how you socialize together and how you work together. Like the
Mhm.
output is basically your culture. What's the water cooler conversation happening, right? Is the conversation happening about backbiting each other and pulling everyone down? Or is the conversation happening uplifting each other, right? The right people. And I give this example of to my team of the Oppenheimer project where all these people came together, 3,000 or 4,000 of the best scientists in the world around a mission and a vision, like you said, right? If we have that part dialed in, it's such a easier task to run a remote or especially a remote organization because you're not there to see each and every one of them. So it's better that they're on your vision. What a great answer, man. I really love it. I promise this is going to be the last one. And we can probably go on for hours, but we can catch up down the road, Liam, and I'll probably send you a
Sure.
few follow-up questions by email as well.
Okay.
So this is the last one that I have for you. What's the biggest challenge in maintaining Time Doctor's remote first culture, especially with the growth that you've seen over the last 5 years, 4 years post COVID?
So I think the first one is preserving the startup feel. As
Hmm.
we are growing bigger and bigger, it's getting more bureaucratic. So
Hmm.
between Rob, as an example, who's the CEO of the company, and a frontline worker, I think there are 7 layers in between those two. And that's a lot. But making sure that we have radical transparency inside of the organization, having an asynchronous environment so that you can get the information that you need, and also allowing for everybody to be able to just move fast and break things is a big part of maintaining that remote first mindset. We've already talked about asynchronous management, but I would definitely put that on the list. The
Hmm.
other one is making sure that you've got alignment and onboarding. So that feeds through mission, vision, values. So the first day that someone starts inside of the company, they need to understand mission, vision, and values. They are quizzed on it, they are tested on it. If
Hmm.
we actually, before we hire someone, we will ask a negative question, a negative interview question. So we'll ask something like this. It's not exactly this question, but so we are a remote organization at Time Doctor, but we really do think it's important that everyone spends at least some time in the office. So if you join the company, you're going to have to spend a couple days in the office per week. Are you okay with that? And if you say no, I'm not, that's exactly the person that we want to hire. Because how
Huh.
many people will tell them, no, I'm not interested. I actually would I don't feel comfortable doing that. I thought this was a remote first position. That's what I signed up. So if
Yeah, yeah.
so that is such a great way of filtering talent, because then they are aligned towards, they've drunk the Kool-Aid with us. Like we feel that we're running a cult. It's about remote work. We're very
Love it,
passionate
man.
about remote
I'm
work.
adding that question to my interview repertoire for sure.
There you go. Yeah. If you have that negative question, it really works out. And also there's another question that I ask, which is the Peter Thiel question, which
Hmm.
is, what truth do you believe in that very few people agree with you on? And that's another really counterintuitive one. So I've gotten answers like, the entire world will be vegan in 10 years. No one will be eating meat in 10 years. And it doesn't matter what the question is, what the
Yeah.
response is. What I want to know is, if is someone willing to actually make that commitment to me and fight me and debate me in that particular subject, or on that issue. So if everyone in the room is saying 1 + 1 = 3, and you're like, 1 + 1 = 2, maybe I should put my hand up. Oh, maybe I shouldn't, because I'm too intimidated to be able to do it. Those are people we don't want in the company,
Yeah.
because they will, if you have no disagreement, then we have no forward momentum. So that's
Hmm.
another big one. And then I would probably just say the other one that's a lot more tactical, but it is problematic, is time zone complexity. Like right
Hmm.
now, even getting everybody into the same place, we do company retreats. So we
Yeah.
do department retreats and we do a company retreat. And just getting everyone into one particular country is incredibly difficult. You probably, because you've got a whole bunch of team members in Pakistan, you probably know this better than most. Probably your team retreats only have to be in Pakistan because the Pakistani passport maybe can't go to a whole bunch of European countries, as an
Yeah.
example, if you wanted to take your team out there. So that's a major issue that we're trying to solve for right now, and not one that we can fundamentally solve in the next, well, in the foreseeable future. There's actually a really cool company. I'm speaking at their conference in 2 months. They are a company called Remote Health. Basically, they do health insurance for remote teams.
Okay.
And they have a conference called Plumia, which
Hmm.
is the idea that you could go through an authentication process with every country. So you could go through an authentication process to allow for a Pakistani passport to give you access to any country that you would want. So it
Hmm.
basically is like a super visa that you could
Hmm.
put inside of your passport to say, okay, now that I've gone through, it's like a Nexus times 10, right? The concept of just going
For the
through these
global.
background
Yeah.
checks. It's a global background check so that you could take that and then say, I have a Pakistani passport. However, I do have this Plumia visa, which you recognize United States. So therefore, I get visa on arrival.
Love it. Yeah, I think that's great, man. I think those challenges are going to be there, especially because when we go remote, we also go global. And I think that's true for you guys. You guys have people all over the world as well. And me, and then also High Level answered the same question, Liam, and what they said, because they have 70% of their team globally and big chunk based out of India as well. So what they do is
Hmm.
that they do a East and West conference. So because people
Okay.
in the East or closer to those areas, they'll be able to travel to Thailand or places where they have easier access from India instead of all of them coming over here. And then the West would go sometimes maybe in Europe and sometimes mostly in the US and all of that stuff. So they do two different employee conferences, and then they have a one customer conference, which is in October in Dallas, where we go and we have our booth and all of that cool stuff. Thank you very much, Liam. I know I've already taken up a lot of your time.
No
I'm going to
worries.
get something sent out custom for you. Look out for
Oh,
that.
thanks.
And then
Okay.
hopefully we get an opportunity to see each other real soon. I'm really looking forward. And then if you have a need to hire any marketing talent, give us a shot. We have great talent, and that's what we do every single day.
Okay. Great. And let me know if anyone on your team is interested in going to running remote, even if
We'll
it's
keep,
just to touch
we'll
base with
definitely be
other.
there next year because
Okay.
we'll align it for our schedules. But if
Yep.
something comes up, I'll keep you posted. Thanks so much,
Cool.
Liam. I really appreciate this, man.